This week, the man arrested in Manchester for burning a Quran pled guilty to a racially aggravated public order offence. This comes at the same time as the government has announced that it will establish a council to decide on a formal definition of Islamophobia. All this has led to concerns over the de facto imposition of blasphemy laws protecting the Islamic religion under the guise of cultural racism. I'm Emma Trimble and this is GB News Originals. Even though the UK abolished blasphemy laws in 2008, like the steam rising from the multicultural cauldron, they are back, whether implicitly or sometimes explicitly, like when MP Tahrir Ali called for the return of blasphemy laws in Parliament late last year.
November marks Islamophobia Awareness Month. Last year, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution condemning the desecration of religious texts, including the Quran, despite opposition from the previous government. Acts of such mindless desecration only serve to fuel division and hatred within our society. Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
Well, can I agree with him that desecration is awful and I think should be condemned across the House. We are, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including, of course, Islamophobia in all of its forms. Thank you.
Good luck to him creating a blasphemy law for all three Abrahamic religions when they all blaspheme against each other by definition. I've seen Islamic dawah stalls with signs that say Jesus is a Muslim. And as a Christian, I think that it's blasphemous to suggest that Christ is anything less than the Son of God. But a Muslim would say that he's a prophet and that my religious beliefs are blasphemous. The Muslim profession of faith, the Shahada, says there is only one God and Muhammad is his messenger, whereas the Gospel tells us that Christ taught, I am the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Never mind non-Abrahamic faiths like Sikhism. The network of Sikh organisations warned that the Islamophobia definition was dangerous, and then in late 2019, Lord Singh stepped down from his BBC Radio 4 programme Thought of the Day after an overzealous producer attempted to censor a script referring to the martyrdom of a Sikh guru over fears of Islamophobia. Good luck to Tahrir Ali squaring that circle, and we know very well how that will turn out. And it's not going to be very even-handed, is it? As Robert Jemerick asked, why do Labour MPs think that it's acceptable to mock Christianity but not Islam? At least in part, the answer is because Christians are not going to murder people who burn the Bible or insult Jesus. It seems the more offended you are, the more likely to be violent, the more you will be afforded protection from the state. If the priority is to preserve the mirage of a successful multicultural society, trouble must be avoided at all costs, and the silencing of weaker voices, of dissenters, blasphemers, apostates, is just collateral damage. The dynamic dictates that the state is always going to have to side with the potential aggressors just to keep a lid on unrest. And so, hostile groups end up with more protection than critics and dissenters, who are sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism, sometimes literally, as we saw in Sweden. And by the law taking the side of the offended religious sensibilities, it places the blame on the victims of fanaticism. Salwan Momaka, who was murdered in Sweden after burning a Quran, and the convicted man in Manchester share something else in common. Momaka was also charged with a hate crime and was awaiting his trial when he was shot dead. But Greater Manchester Police have taken things one step further. They have effectively doxed the subject, releasing his name, date of birth, and even where he lives, all despite the College of Policing suggesting and making it very clear in their own guidelines that the police can withhold the name of the accused in exceptional and legitimate circumstances. Circumstances like this, where releasing the name of the suspect could get him murdered, is exactly what this guidance was designed for. Yet someone signed off on this and took the active decision to release that information, putting a target on his back for the rest of his life. It is not an exaggeration to say that the Ayatollahs at Greater Manchester Police have effectively issued a Rushdie-style fatwa aiding and abetting those who wish to cause blasphemers harm. Which is worse, if they did so ignorantly or they did it intentionally. And they must be aware that the teacher from Batley has still been in hiding since 2021 with his family. Now, many want to know who is responsible and how can they be held accountable for their reckless or malicious decision. What's worse, the Labour government have joined the fray on the side of censorship. Instead of standing up for free expression, they have announced a 16-strong council on Islamophobia, chaired by none other than Dominic Grieve KC. Hardly a neutral chair, as he wrote the foreword for the all-party parliamentary group on Islamophobia that proposed the definition that many have feared since constitutes a backdoor blasphemy law, using the idea of cultural racism to silence criticism of Islam. At the time, concerns were aired across the spectrum, from secularists, atheists and Sikhs to ex-Muslims, feminists and Christians, all raising the alarm that this would create a special protection for Islam. The report explained clearly that criticisms of Islam are a form of anti-Muslim hate because they serve to marginalise and stigmatise Muslims. The examples they gave include saying that Islam was spread by the sword, a point of historical interest, or that Muhammad was a paedophile, so presumably there could be no discussion of the hadith which states that he married his wife Aisha aged 6 and consummated it when she was 9. As Ayaan Hirsi Ali points out, we are now simply letting Sharia law in by the front door. The judge in the Manchester case said that the mishandling of the Quran would cause extreme distress and that this is a tolerant country, but we just do not tolerate this behaviour. This is a tolerant country, where we only tolerate the intolerant. The victim, a passerby, described how he felt heartbroken and said that it was the most emotion that he had ever felt. Instead of maintaining that in a civilised society, your feelings don't get to impinge on the rights of others to express themselves or to protest, and that, in fact, that kind of emotional response is very much a you problem, the judge's statement effectively enforced Sharia law by acknowledging the sacred protected status of the Quran, whether you are a Muslim or not. Maybe Kelvin Mackenzie is right, and that all of this is because the Labour government have one eye on the 2029 Muslim vote.
Is this a blasphemy law by the back door?
Yeah,
actually,
it's an absolute shocker, and of course it's being done. For instance, if we're going to do it for Islam, why don't we do it for the Hindus? Why don't we do it for the Christians? Why don't we have anything that a religion feels is offensive to them? We'll have a law, effectively, which means it will be a nightmare, and it's only being done for one simple reason. They want to get the Muslim vote back on side for 2029. I feel this will cause, if they decide to go ahead with it, I can't understand why they want to do it, but if they do go ahead with it, it will cause an absolute nightmare at the come polling day. I think it's a shocking mistake, and I can only believe it's being done because they wanted to get the Muslims on side.
After all, senior figures like Wes Streeting did have their majorities cut dramatically by independent Muslim and pro-Gaza candidates. On top of that, the Muslim Vote Organisation, which calls for the adoption of the APPG definition of Islamophobia, provides advice for how to vote in constituencies where the population of Muslims is 10% or more. Many of those seats are those of prominent Labour politicians. See, the problem is that in a multicultural society, some of those cultures are going to be less tolerant than others. And that is the paradox of tolerance expressed best by philosopher Karl Popper, who wrote, "Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them." Going back decades, the craven responses of Western governments, including our own, have emboldened those who want to impose their own religious sensitivities on the rest of us. And now we have reached a serious juncture where the demands of religious bullies could very well be solidified into law by this Labour government. Now, there are commentators who are justifying their position by calling for it to be illegal to burn Bibles as well. But as a Christian, however much I would not like you to burn the Bible, however much I think it would be a bad thing to do, I haven't got the right, and I do not want the right, to interfere with your right to do whatever you want with a book that you own. I certainly don't want to see anyone arrested for speaking against my religion. And as a Christian, I do believe that Islam is not true. I want the right to say so. I have the right, at least for now, to call out beliefs that I find morally repugnant. But, most of all, I don't want to live in a society where I'm compelled to curb my speech or my actions to suit the most hypersensitive, volatile, and potentially violent people in our society. Do you? Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel.